Good evening. The streets of the city were eerily empty today as tens of thousands of workers stayed away on the day bosses could order their employees back into their offices. In fact, during rush hour this morning, only 20,000 more people were on the tube compared to a week ago. And right now, this is deepening the crisis for businesses which rely on commuters to spend their cash in the square mile, as our political correspondent Simon Harris now reports.
It's supposed to be the beating heart of London's economy, but the city has yet to spring back into life. Broadgate Circle used to be bustling and vibrant, not today. Outside Liverpool Street Station, cabbies waited in vain.
I've been here for 2 hours. I've done one job for £10.
I've been averaging 4 or 5 jobs a day, not, 4 or 5 jobs in the morning and same in the afternoon.
For the first time since lockdown, bosses can now order staff back to work. But there was little evidence of the new rule being enforced in the square mile. Everywhere there were telltale signs, like empty escalators and the stationary lifts on the outside of the Lloyd's building. Staff here aren't expected back until next month. The familiar pattern of city life has all but vanished. There are no swarms of commuters arriving by train, no lunchtime queues at sandwich shops, no packed bars and restaurants after work. The city has a warren of narrow streets like Artillery Passage, where most businesses were shut today. The owner of a Japanese and Korean takeaway normally relies on walk-in customers.
Walk-in customers really quiet and small numbers. That's quite affecting my business.
What no one knows for sure is whether city workers will ever return en masse.
I think there is a question about how much they come back. So will it be exactly the same? Will everybody come back? Or will there be a new norm where more people work from home? And that's something that's being discussed quite a lot now.
But until big businesses bring back their staff, small businesses will struggle. The Bunch of Grapes was among the first city pubs to reopen, but trade is slow.
Hopefully it will pick up. It's London, it's the greatest city in the world, so obviously it will pick up.
Confident it'll bounce back?
Hopefully, yes.
What we know from history is, despite plagues and the Blitz and all the other bad things that have happened to London, eventually, central London, eventually the city does always bounce back.
There were some signs of a limited return to work during this morning's rush hour. The tube carried more commuters than last Monday, but only 20,000 more, an increase of just 6%.
It is all so fragile, isn't it, Simon? And yet now we're hearing there's a row brewing over what any future lockdown in London might look like.
Yes, not for the first time since the outbreak of coronavirus. The Mayor of London has accused ministers of leaving him out of the loop. It emerged yesterday that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor had been rehearsing certain scenarios if there was a major spike in infections. And one of them was said to involve a London-only lockdown, which might involve the M25 motorway being a border between London and the rest of the country. Now, Downing Street insisted there were no plans for a London-only lockdown, and it's always been the case that in any local lockdown, transport restrictions might be part of it. But the Mayor of London said it was unacceptable that he and local government leaders in London weren't invited to take part in the exercise, and he accused the government of riding roughshod over local politicians. OK, Simon, thank you for that update.
Now, it started out as a single pizza restaurant in Soho in 1965, inspired by a trip to Italy and frustration at the lack of good pizza in the capital. 55 years on, Pizza Express is an institution on the high street with 122 restaurants in London and the home counties. But it is now the latest chain to have to restructure after trading stopped during the pandemic. 67 restaurants are at risk of closure, which would mean a loss of more than 1,000 jobs. Simon Harris reports.
It's the pizza chain which ran out of dough. Pizza Express has debts of almost £750 million and today announced drastic action to try to stop hemorrhaging money. More than 1,000 jobs could be chopped, with around 70 restaurants closing.
I think it's really sad. Pizza Express is one of the biggest employers in our sector in terms of the casual dining scene, and I mean, been around for 40 plus years. It's a big name, and it's a very sad time.
Pizza Express was the brainchild of Peter Boiseau, who opened his first restaurant in Soho in 1965, revolutionising the way we eat out. Last year, the company celebrated its 54th birthday with a mass tossing in Oxford Circus, but the celebrations were short-lived. The firm has become the latest casualty of the coronavirus outbreak. This Pizza Express on the edge of the city is still closed, but then offices around here are largely deserted, so many potential customers are now working from home. But even before lockdown, Pizza Express was in trouble.
Pizza Express did go into COVID with a number of issues. It had expanded very quickly, perhaps beyond the number of restaurants that the UK could reasonably take. And I think perhaps under the Chinese owners there was more focus on the international business than there was on the UK.
The Wimbledon branch once immortalised local hero Andy Murray with a bust made from pizza dough. More recently, the Woking branch became the butt of many jokes after Prince Andrew used it as an alibi to deny allegations about his behaviour.
I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking. I've only been to Woking a couple of times, and I remember it weirdly distinctly.
Pizza Express has more than 120 branches in London and the home counties. It's not clear yet which ones will close. The company is also putting itself up for sale. Simon Harris, ITV News.
A vigil will be held tonight in Hyde Park for the victims of the huge blast in Beirut. The number of dead there currently stands at 135, with 5,000 wounded. Or here, thousands of miles away, Londoners with relatives and friends in the capital of Lebanon could only watch in horror and wait, praying their loved ones were safe and mourning for the place they call home, as Simon Harris reports.
In London's Lebanese community, everyone knows someone caught up in the disaster.
I have all my family, my brothers and sisters back there.
I have friends in the area.
I have friends who are trying to find their sisters, their brothers who have disappeared.
The explosion sent a blast wave across Beirut, tearing into people and buildings. Christina runs a pharmacy in London's Edgware Road, a corner of the capital often called Little Beirut.
I have friends in the area. Luckily, they weren't at home, but their buildings came down. Windows shattered, doors broken. It's insane. It's devastating, especially after everything that they're already going through with the economic crisis, corona, and now this. It's the last thing that they needed.
Abbas, a barber, spent last night checking to see if his relatives were okay.
My sister, she lives like 5 minutes away from the explosion, and she was saying the whole building, the glass, the doors are smashed to the ground. Like more than 100 deaths. People was dead bodies on the streets, all over the streets.
Hassan sells mobile phones. Thanks to this technology and social media, families here were able to exchange messages with loved ones there.
We all come from like big families. Big brother, I've got, many brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews there. Yeah, we tried to make sure everybody's okay, everybody's safe, and thanks God for that, they are all okay. They thought maybe it's an earthquake, felt like an earthquake, or I don't know, tsunami or something like that. I mean, part of my family, they live far away in the south. Even they live in the south, which is very far away from the port. They heard Big Bang.
The devastation to this once glamorous Mediterranean city has prompted a fundraising appeal among Lebanese expats in London.
We're going to need to fix a lot of homes. A lot of people will lose their jobs because of this, and hence we'll need to help them to some NGOs. So it's going to be really, really bad. And hospitals obviously lack infrastructure, especially after this, so they're going to need a lot of medical supply.
As the death toll rises, London's Lebanese community is trying to take in the full extent of this catastrophe. Simon Harris, ITV News, Edgware Road.
Good evening. Tushan Daniel kissed his dad goodbye and left the house to go and watch Arsenal with a friend. 1 hour later, his father was on the tube platform at Hillingdon in West London, watching desperate efforts to save his son's life. Today, the man who killed him was found guilty of murder, his co-defendant guilty of manslaughter. The judge said the killing, which appeared to be sparked by a look across the train tracks, was senseless. Simon Harris reports.
Tushan Daniel wasn't just a keen athlete, he was good too. So good his coaches thought he could have represented his country.
But last September, the 20-year-old was the victim of a senseless murder as he waited for a tube. This CCTV footage shows Tushan in a red Arsenal shirt with a friend on the platform at Hillingdon. They're approached by two men who spotted them from the opposite platform. Jonathan Camille on the left in the hoodie, Alex Lanning in the baseball cap. Lanning apparently didn't like the way Tushan looked at him, and moments later he stabbed him through the heart. As Lanning and Camille ran up the stairs, Tushan collapsed on the floor.
Immediately after the killing, the two men did everything they could to cover their tracks. They threw away their blood-stained clothes after stealing pyjamas and towels which were drying outside a house on a nearby estate. They hid the knife under a paving slab.
Today, Lanning was found guilty of murder. Camille was found guilty of manslaughter. Both men denied the murder charge. Afterwards, Tushan's father spoke outside the Old Bailey.
As parents, we had to watch in disbelief as the paramedics worked on our son's lifeless body on that platform at Hillingdon. A platform which we will never be able to use again. I held him, stroked his face and kissed him as he lay on that platform, only to be told by the paramedics that there was nothing more they could do for him.
This was the military knife Lanning used. He claimed Tushan's death was an accident, but Lanning had a violent past. He was on parole from prison after an earlier knife attack.
It's very, very disgusting. And for someone like him to be still walking the street, considering he was still on licence, it's really, really painful to take.
I mean, the knife, as all you've seen, it's horrific. Someone who was on licence to be carrying, and for previous knife crime offence as well, just makes a mockery of the whole system. Really, this knife crime is not about gangs or not about youths fighting each other. It could affect anybody.
Tushan was one of 150 Londoners who were murdered last year. His killers will be sentenced later this month. Simon Harris, ITV News, Hillingdon.
Good evening. Temperatures soared across London today, reaching 36.4 degrees, making it the hottest August day since 2003. Unsurprisingly, people have been heading to parks and are still there. This is Hampstead Heath right now, where it's still in the 30s, people there enjoying the water. Thousands also headed to the coast. This was Camber Sands earlier, where all the car parks quickly filled up. There are, however, warnings of places to avoid the many open water spots across the capital. But despite the dangers, many went swimming anyway, some telling ITV News London they weren't worried. But the mother of a man who drowned during last year's heatwave says it can be lethal and cost lives. Here's our correspondent Simon Harris.
For some Londoners, there was only one way to cope with the heatwave, a refreshing dip in the docks. As temperatures rose, swimmers headed for Shadwell Basin, always a popular spot in weather like this, but one where swimming is banned and the water carries a health warning.
There are signs up saying swimming's forbidden, people have drowned here.
Yes, I have seen the signs, but I feel that kind of goes for any sort of swimming. I'm a strong swimmer.
Did you know a boy drowned in here last summer?
Yeah, I did know that, but people drown all the time. They drown at the beach, they drown everywhere. I think it's safer to swim here than in many ponds where there are lifeguards, because at least there's loads of places to get out.
Do you feel at risk in there?
No, feel fine.
You're a strong swimmer?
Strong swimmer, yeah. Yeah, I reckon I can get around, it's fine, it's not too bad.
At one point while we were filming, police spoke to people at the basin, seemingly unaware that two swimmers, Ros and Kaya, were hiding under the bridge.
We decided to stay underneath the bridge because they wouldn't be able to see us as they walked above. They did say it's at our own risk.
As long as it's kind of on our terms and our risk, they're okay for us to swim responsibly around here.
According to the swimmers, the police were relaxed, but Shadwell Basin has claimed lives.
The signs warning people not to go into the water are a reminder of what happened here last summer. A young man swimming with his friends disappeared beneath the surface and drowned.
Jonathan Adebanjo was a 23-year-old art student said by his family to be a good swimmer. A year after the tragedy, his mum is still devastated by the loss of her son, JJ.
I can't function without my son. Believe me, I'm a very strong person. This is the first time I understand the full meaning of stress and depression.
What would you say to any young people tempted today in this hot weather to go for a swim? somewhere
I would
like
just
that?
ask them to please, to stop it, not to do it, to be careful.
Being a strong swimmer can give a false sense of security.
Even in a hot day today, we've got the Thames behind us. The temperatures in there would be freezing, and your body will react with a cold water shock, which was the minute you hit the water, you'll gasp and you potentially take on the water.
Tonight, the Mayor of Tower Hamlets said the council's efforts to stop scenes like this were being undermined by websites which recommend Shadwell Basin as a place to go for wild swimming. Simon Harris, ITV News, Shadwell.